Hello and welcome to Political Forum Wednesday, November 16th. Today we welcome Alderman John Arena from the 45th Ward. Thank you for being with us. My name is Freddie Calixto. I'm a board member here at CAN TV. And this is, you're watching an interactive program brought to you as a community service by CAN TV. We would like you to tell your friends that you also can watch us on CAN TV through the website, which is cantv.org/hotline. If they can't watch us on cable, they could do it online. And we welcome your questions for the alderman. So please call at 312-738-1060. And we'll try to get as many calls on the air as possible. So again, Alderman, thank you very much for being with us. How are things going in the 45th Ward?
Happy to report I think they're going well. We've got quite a bit of development going on at Six Corners, which is Cicero, Irving, and Milwaukee Avenue. New retail is coming in, lots of new restaurants. The Portage Theater is back open. And some new residential development going in Jeff Park that's going to complement the reconstruction of the Jeff Park terminal coming up in the next couple of years. So there's a lot of good things going on. We're really excited.
Great. Well, let me put up the information about the office and the map of your 45th Ward. Okay, so
sure.
This is where you can get a hold of the alderman, his address, phone number, and email. And you want to briefly talk about the map?
Sure. So we're the neighborhoods by neighborhood. We're from the southeast, Independence Park, Old Irving Park, and sections of Portage Park. Jefferson Park is the heart of the ward, and then Gladstone Park and Union Ridge to the north and the west. And by boundaries, Peterson, Nagel, and Central Park and Addison on the far south. Great.
So you got a pretty good chunk of the northwest side of the city of Chicago.
Absolutely.
You were mentioning Portage Theater. What's going on there now?
So the building has turned over to a new owner who's renovating some of the residential components and the new retail. The theater itself is open and showing a variety of different types of general performances. So you could check out Google the Portage Theater and see what's on the docket coming up. And we have a longtime Jefferson Park business that's relocating into that building named Fishman's Liquors. They're going to be Fishman's Public House, so it's going to be a restaurant. And their claim to fame was being one of the 6 best beer emporiums in the city of Chicago. Per Chicago Magazine. So we're glad that while they couldn't stay in the location they were in, we're glad that we kept them in the ward,
nice.
Not too far away from their original home.
Right. They were on Lawrence, off of Milwaukee and Lawrence.
They were on Lawrence and Milwaukee, and now they're going to be down by Six Corners.
Oh, very nice. Well, let's talk about today's City Council.
Sure.
How did that go? I know that today was a very important meeting. The 2017 budget was approved.
Absolutely.
It was approved, and it included a 7-cent fee on disposable bags.
Yeah, and I think this is a reform to a ban that was implemented a couple of years ago.
Yes.
So people probably noticed that some retailers weren't providing plastic bags, the thinner plastic bags that we've used for decades now. And they were either providing plastic, or they were asking people to bring their own, or they were providing thicker bags. And that was kind of in a response to the ban of the thinner ones. And it's an environmental issue that these bags are horrible for the environment. So we're trying to find ways as a municipality to reduce the infrastructure costs that they pose on us, and find ways that as consumers we can be more sustainable about how we shop. So the ban was put in. It didn't have the effect that we wanted. It wasn't driving down the use of those plastic bags enough. And what we've seen nationally is a shift to just imposing a small fee is a heavier motivator for consumers, to encourage them to simply avoid the fee by bringing your own cloth or reusable bags to the grocery store, and that way you avoid any fee involved with this. On the plus side for the city's finances, and why it's related to the budget, is the fee will generate some revenue. Some of it will go. Of the 7 cents, 2 cents will go to the retailer, and 5 cents will go to the city. So that will help us close some of the budget gaps that we've had, and mitigate the environmental impact of the bags that are used.
So right now, let's say if you go to a grocery store, they charge you 10 cents for a bag. There's going to be 7 cents on top of that 10.
If grocery stores are charging a fee now,
Yes.
it's simply by the grocer is charging that. That's their choice. There is no city-imposed fee. There's only a ban on these very thin, kind of one-time use bags that are traditional. So we're getting rid of the ban. We're allowing those bags back, but we're encouraging people to use reusable bags as opposed to making that choice. And the financial motivator is the thing that other cities who have been doing this for years, San Francisco, other cities in California, some in the Midwest even, have found that the financial motivator, the saving a dime here or 7 cents there, is really what gets people to remember to bring those bags in from the trunk of their car.
Great. Yeah, I always forget to bring the bags, and I even have them in the trunk of my car. Just go to the store without them.
That's what we're trying to. Hopefully,
Yes.
we'll get some signs up in the parking lot to tell you.
Get that
remember
bag,
your bag.
yes.
Yeah.
We have a caller on the line. Caller, what is your question? Hello?
Hi, I'm calling because I live near Jefferson Park between Montrose and Lawrence near Central. There's been a lot of construction around there recently, and I was wondering if that construction that's been on the streets if any of that is going to contribute to maybe safer walking for pedestrians and crossing the streets, like the pedestrian bump outs and things like that.
That's a great question. Thank you for bringing that to us. There's quite a bit of work going on. Some of it's underground work, water supply reconstruction, or sewer reconstruction. The area that you just mentioned is something that our participatory budgeting committee has identified as a place that we need to increase the pedestrian safety. And so we do have plans on Central Avenue, south of Lawrence Avenue, to add pedestrian bump outs and more clear crossings for pedestrians so that drivers know. Actually, in today's city council, I introduced a revision to the city code that would remove what's called rush hour parking restrictions. It's a technique to open up a two-way road into a four-lane road for rush hour or peak periods. But implementing that limits us in some of the pedestrian safety measures. So I'm taking those out, and then we're going to be adding some of these bump outs in the spring of next year.
Thank you for that caller. Let's talk about the installation of 100 parking meters that was discussed also in the city council today.
So the ever popular city parking meter deal is kind of a liability that we are constantly dealing with. And one of the challenges with this is when we do work, as this last caller just mentioned, we have to decommission some parking spaces that affect the revenue stream for this contract. And we have to kind of, at the end of the year, true up with the company what they expected revenue and what we took out of service because of maintenance. And by expanding the number of parking spaces that are available system-wide, it helps mitigate that payment we have to make at the end of the year. This year, it's somewhere around $12 million. The city would be best served if we were able to get that down to zero, or even if we go beyond zero, we can actually start recouping some of the revenue from the additional spaces we create. So this is kind of looking very strategically around the system to try to find places where we already have parking, but maybe we have a few spaces on a block that aren't included, and we're expanding it that way. So it's a very strategic analysis, and it'll help, again, mitigate some of that cost that we pay to the company.
Okay. Thank you. We're looking for your call. Please call us at 312-738-1060 to ask the alderman any question you would like. Raising parking fees at the city airports. That was another thing that you guys talked about earlier today.
Yeah, we discussed that during the budget hearings.
Yes.
We see that within the airport structure, some of that revenue does come out of the airports. Most of the revenue we generate in the airports goes to pay for airport operations. But the fees and the taxes that come from the parking are ways that we can increase the revenue. Most of the time, that's from travelers who are coming to enjoy the city. So it affects the local residents a little less than other revenue streams we might look at. But it also gives us an opportunity to bring in some money that we desperately need to get our financial house in order.
Great, thank you. We have a caller on the line. Caller, what is your question?
Hello?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. Alderman, I wanted to know, so obviously now the President of the United States is from Chicago, and we have, as a city, an excellent relationship with that President and that administration. Our incoming President, however, we've clearly just removed a street sign that was supposed to honor him, and I also hear that there was some back and forth earlier this week between he and the mayor regarding the sanctuary city issue. And I just kind of wanted to get your take on what has happened and what our relationship as a city will be with this new administration going forward.
Well, like always, we look forward to a productive relationship with whoever's in office. In the case of the sanctuary city status, not just Chicago, but other cities have responded like we have in saying, look, this is not an issue that we should be penalized for. If this president, the president-elect, is going to use this issue to penalize us by withholding federal funds, this is a fight that we're willing to take on. Today we introduced a resolution into the City Council. Alderman Amaya Pawar and Carlos Rosa, myself, and many others signed on to it, and there was quite a bit of discussion, heartfelt discussion about who we're talking about when we talk about immigrants. These are friends, these are family members, these are people, these are our neighbors. And this city has a long history of welcoming folks from other cultures into our fabric and making that quilt whole. So I fully support the mayor in this, in standing up and being proud about who we are as a city. And if Donald Trump chooses to, I guess, use this as a penalty to the city, then like many other challenges we face, we will overcome it. But it's out of a sense of fairness and pride in who we are as a city, and that we are a welcoming city. And that's something I think we have to hold on to at this particular time in politics.
Great. Caller, thank you so much for that at the question. We have another caller on the line. Caller, what is your question?
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Good. How are you?
Good.
You ready for me?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. I had a source of the revenue stream. They had the parade for the Cubs, and it was estimated like 5 million people came to that parade.
Mm-hmm.
But if they have something at Grant Park or Soldier Field, just charge everybody $1, and that could help reduce the deficit.
Well,
And, it'd be a revenue stream. This is similar to what Alderman Lopez had suggested when he was talking about charging the people to come to the case.
mm-hmm.
So that's what I had as a suggestion. Now, I made this to Alderman Irvin, but I don't know if he took the ball and ran with it yet.
Gotcha.
So let's tell me what you think, and thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you.
Well, as a Cubs fan, I sure hope that we have an opportunity to celebrate every year a Cubs World Series win like that.
Yes.
But I think the caller's question kind of centered around, when we have these events about kind of a fee per person. It depends on the event, and I would say we charge for a lot of events. The sponsors of events pay the city for the cost of police and OEMC, or Office of Emergency Management, anything that it costs the city to help make sure an event is safe. If it's the Park District events, there's some fee that they might pay the Park District that the Park District could decide what that fee is. So there are ways that these events do generate revenue to, at the very least, cover the cost that the city might have to put out in terms of police oversight. But I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues on ways that we can help generate revenue from these events, whether they're reoccurring or one-time events. But I think in the case of the Cubs celebration, there was the cost of that event was offset by American Airlines. They paid to host that event, and all the costs were paid for by the airline.
Great. Thank you for that question, caller. We have another caller on the line. Caller, what is your question?
Hi, Alderman.
Hey.
Thanks for taking my call. I have a question with the success of the 606 and other rails to trails. What is the planning process of the Weaver Spur Trail, and how do you plan to connect that to different neighborhoods throughout the ward?
Great question. So as you know, probably are aware, we just had the extension of the North Branch Trail, a connector between roughly Elston Avenue up north to the Devon beginning of that trail. So a lot of this planning is between the city and the Cook County Forest Preserve. So they are in the planning stages for the Weber Spur. I believe that they're working on funding sources for that. I do understand that there is a commitment to build that out, but I don't have a date that I could announce as to when that's going to happen. I think the challenge is going to be making sure the federal dollars are there, and usually these are done with federal pollution mitigation dollars and a matching local contribution. That's how some of the other projects that we've done in the ward, as well as the extension of the North Branch Trail. So I would say keep an eye on that. Check the Cook County Forest Preserve website for the plans and the proposed route that's been published, and that would give you more information on where the financing is right now.
Great. Thank you for that question, caller. We kind of mentioned a little bit about the police earlier.
Yeah.
And I know that was a topic of discussion at City Council this morning.
Yep.
So there was hiring more police officers.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you think about that?
Thank you for that question. It is a big component of this particular budget.
Yes.
And year over year, I've been, myself and some members of the Progressive Caucus and generally members of the City Council have been concerned about where our staffing levels were and whether we were approaching policing in Chicago from the right angle. Callers might be aware that we were spending close to or above $100 million a year on overtime for our police. And that is an indication that we didn't have the manpower we needed on staff to cover the demands of a city like Chicago. So this year, the mayor kind of changed tact. He had been steadfast in saying we had staffing. The previous superintendent was fixed on that. And some of us disagreed with that, and some of my previous no votes on the budget were specifically because we weren't addressing that problem. So I'm proud that the mayor has shifted and is working with the new superintendent to increase the number of officers that we have on duty. Will kind of be a phased approach. We'll get 500 additional beat officers over the next 2 years. Adding probably another 250 kind of management tier officers, lieutenants, sergeants, and such to help kind of round out the staffing there as we promote from within. But we have a lot of officers that are retiring. Year over year, we probably have about 1,000 officers that will retire this year alone. And we were hovering somewhere just over 9,000 officers, badged officers, and we want to see that number grow to about 10,000. I think we'll be able at a stable force.
Great. So in this budget, it really addresses that issue of the people that are retiring.
Exactly. The goal is 1,000 officers within 2 years, and that includes the different positions that I mentioned earlier.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. So are you happy about the concerns of this budget?
I guess the mayor and I have different views on where emphasis and some priorities. I think that this budget, was generally an easier budget because the property tax increase that was implemented or authorized in the 2016 budget is now kind of, we're basically just authorizing the levy as it kind of scales in. That's money that's going to go into the police and fire pensions. And it's money that's going to go into the general fund to help round out our budget deficits. So this year we were focusing on obviously the police hiring that we just described, as well as some other things that in concept I like. The one of them is a Catalyst Fund, the Chicago Catalyst Fund. It's a brainchild of Treasurer Kurt Summers, which is a fund that will invest, hopefully, in neighborhoods that aren't already positioned to get funding for projects or investment from private developers right now. So the intent of the fund is to work with groups like Action Chicago and other other developers that are looking for opportunities in underserved areas. And we would be putting some money in, and the hope is that some private money would come into the fund to match that, and we would be able to expand the impact of the local dollars that we have. Some of our concerns is the structure and the oversight to make sure that that money isn't going into neighborhoods that are already getting investment, that are without a catalyst or without an incentive. They're not going into TIF areas and things like that where we already have tools to spur an investor to the table. We want to see this money go into areas that are stagnant right now, that are not getting the attention they deserve, and that will help those neighborhoods get out of the cycle of poverty and violence that they're beset with because of that stagnation. So there are some good ideas in this budget, and I'm excited to work with the administration on making sure that they perform in the way they're intended to at the original outset.
Great, thank you so much. Caller, we have another caller on the line. Caller, what is your question?
Yes, good evening. I have a question. With the bag tax that just was passed today, and then the property tax, as you mentioned, which is going to start next year, and also the Cook County is going to implement a sugar tax on drinks. Alderman, are you concerned that taxpayers in Chicago are asking to foot too much of the bill in terms of when it comes to revenue?
Absolutely. I think that is always a concern that I have, that all of my colleagues have, and even the mayor does. When we have these discussions about what's the amount of an increase and why are we doing it, and making sure that it's going towards a real need of the city, that is definitely something that's part of the discussion amongst individual aldermen as well as during our budget hearings that closed up a couple weeks ago. We have to make sure that there's confidence in the taxpaying public that we're spending their money wisely, that we're doing things that have to be done. I think this city, over the course of the 2 decades of the Daley administration, was given kind of a false sense of what it costs to run the city and what tax increases, when they should be levied, and how we should go about having a discussion about that. So I think we had been given as taxpayers a sense that we can run this city without any cost of living, despite the fact that we know a cost of bread is more now than it was 20 years ago, and a hamburger is more now than it was 20 years ago. So there were some gimmicks. We talked about the parking meter deal, ways to kind of bring in revenue to kind of stave off a conversation, a tough conversation about tax increases. But I think this administration has been strategic about reducing some of those gimmicks, especially in our debt. There's something called scoop and toss, where it's like refinancing your house, where you take money out of the equity you have in the home, and then you refinance it, down the road. So we have to be clear about that, and I think what I try to do is make sure I talk to my constituents about whatever increases we're looking at, and make sure that we talk to them about why we're doing it and what are the real reasons for it, that these are real obligations that the city has to tackle.
Thank you for that that question, caller. And our time is running out. We got to wrap this up. Are there any other things you want to talk about in the 45th Ward?
We need a lot more time if you let me go on, but I want to thank CAN TV for having me on, and all of the callers. I think we have a great city. We have a great country, and I think in the political environment we have now, more important than ever that we have conversations with elected officials and with our constituents openly about what our concerns are and how do we work together to move forward, because that's where our best hope is.
Great. I'd like to thank our technician, Sylvia, for helping us on the phone lines. Thank you very much. We have a couple more minutes, I guess. We can maybe get into one more question about residential parking permits in your ward.
Yeah, that's always a fun conversation, especially with all of the transit points that we have along the Blue Line. We have commuters that want to use the residential parking for their needs, and we have residents that want to make sure that they have access to parking close to their homes. So it's something that I use very judiciously as a tool to kind of manage that. We want to make sure that, one, we understand that parking on the street is free and open, in these residential blocks, and it's a shared resource. But we also want to make sure that we have some controls, especially when we have those transit centers nearby. So we've been working with CDOT and kind of doing some analysis of where those techniques are implemented and trying to make sure that again, there's a balance to how we use the parking in our city.
Great, thank you. How about the tax rebate? Can you tell people how much time we have left for that?
Yeah, that's something that you can go to the website, 45thward.org. There is a process right now that if you're a low-income user, you can apply for a rebate on your property taxes based on need. It's a sliding scale. So I encourage people to go to my website and look up more information about that.
Great. Alderman, thank you so much for being on the show again. It's
You're
a
welcome.
pleasure to have you. And callers, thank you for your questions. That's another show. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate having you.
Thank you very much.